This is the Newsload.
Hi there, my name is Brian Baker, and this is a new podcast slash YouTube series called Conspiracy Crush. Thanks for joining us. I'm interviewing Scott Taylor, who is a veteran journalist. He has a long, reputable history of doing journalist stuff. So, working for the Ottawa Sun, London Free Press, the Canadian Press. He's the author of a book named Passing Through Oblivion. And I thought he'd be a great first sort of debut person to chat about journalism in general, the state of journalism. Do you want to jump in, Scott, and just how you feeling today? I appreciate you coming.
I'm pleased to be here. Thanks for asking me. And every time I hear the word veteran, what goes through my head is the word old.
Yeah. You know, when I set this all up today, I was looking at my picture. I don't see myself on the screen very often. I was thinking, geez, when did I get all the jowls? I got jowls now.
Yeah.
Jowls.
Yeah. Well,
I don't even like saying that damn word.
Lives well lived.
That's right. Yeah. So, battle scars, I guess they call them, eh? So, let's just jump into it here. So why don't you just give the audience a bit of a rundown as to, how you got into journalism and bring us up to the moment, if you don't mind.
Well, briefly, my dad was a columnist in Montreal, where I grew up. He worked for the Montreal Star, the old Montreal Star, the Montreal Gazette. He had a daily column in those papers, and so I kind of came by it naturally. I went to school for journalism and started off very small. Started off with, a small weekly in Montreal. Then I went to a paper called The Suburban, which was a larger weekly. It's been around forever, actually, and it's about 100,000 copies last I heard. So it was pretty big. And then The Chronicle on the West Island of Montreal. And then I started to make some inroads. I went to the Ottawa Business Journal, and from there to the Ottawa Sun, and then the London Free Press, because that's where my wife was living. She wasn't my wife yet, but I moved here for her. So the London Free Press and, Metro London. I was the editor of 3 community papers after that, and it kind of goes on and on. I'm like a lot of people out there, a lot of journalists, that as time has gone on, newsrooms have shrunk, and so we jump from ship to ship. And if you want to stay in the business, that's what you do sometimes.
Yeah, I want to get into that. Tell me, do you have a moment you can remember where you got the bug? Where you, what jumps to your mind when I ask you
that? It was for the Suburban in Montreal. I was doing something on the, I can't even remember the arm of the government now, but they take care of the elderly and people who are unable to take care of themselves.
Ministry for Long-Term Care.
Something along those lines, anyways. It was the Quebec government, and I had an interview with somebody in which they pretty much incriminated themselves, agreed with what I was writing about or what I suspected, and I was going to write the story, and 2 of them showed up at the office and threatened lawsuits and imprisonment and torture and making me eat liver and all that sort of stuff. And so I'll use my phone as a prop. I told them that I was about to go on a call-in show, a talk show, news show in Montreal with a fellow named Tommy Schnurmacher, who used to be very big there. And I was about to go on the show and talk to them about my story. And so they came in the office and they, as I said, threatened me and everything. And I held up my recorder and I said, I have everything here. I record everything. I hadn't. but I held it up. And I remember my editor, he was in an office to my left, and I remember him kind of craning his neck around the door as I did this. And anyways, I said, you want to just drop everything and I won't go on the radio show and I won't play the recording. But anyways, that was
wonderful.
It was my one and only.
That's the story that got you hot for journalism. That is hilarious.
One and only poker bet I ever won in my life. But yeah, that was like, okay, we're in the big time now. We have a government suing us, and we talked our way out of it. So that kind of got me going.
That is exciting. Yeah, I understand that. That's like a movie moment, right? So
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
But the best was the
Yeah.
editor just craning his neck around the corner, wondering if he was going to have a place to work the next day.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose. I guess the question that jumps out at me there is that moment. I'm sure is still repeated over and over again to this very day. Why don't you give me a sense for how journalism has changed from those early days to how you see it? We'll get into the financial side, but I mean just as sort of like the working day to day, if anything jumps to mind there.
Well, in my career, which is fairly long, but um, it started off with a notebook and a pen, and sometimes a photographer along for the ride. We never took our own pictures. We had a notebook, we had a pen, we scribbled, and we phoned. And if you were working for a daily, you struggled to get your story out or to a copy editor in time for the next day's edition. If you worked for a weekly, you might even sit on it for a day or two before you felt like writing it. Fast forward 30 years, and I'm covering a riot in London at Fanshawe, near Fanshawe College. It was at St. Patrick's Day. Gosh, probably about 11 or 12 years ago now. It was known as the Fleming Drive riot. There were about 1,000, mostly drunk young people there, and police everywhere. And I was actually at work at the London Free Press that night. It was a really quiet night, and I was the only reporter on. And I told my boss, "Look, I'm going to go home. If anything comes up, And then I saw something on Twitter that said there's a couch burning on Fleming Drive. I went, okay, tell you what, I'm going to go by, see the couch, see what's going on. And I had a motorcycle, and as I was driving down Oxford Street, police cars were going past me.
Wow.
When I got there, I heard the loudspeaker. They were saying, "This is an unlawful assembly. You must leave." And then at one end of the street are all these police in riot gear, and all the way up the street are 1,000 kids throwing bottles at them and screaming and breaking planks of wood from fences and throwing it. And it ended up with a CTV news truck exploding right in front of me.
Jeez, I kind of remember news about that. I didn't realize it was so bad, though. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so what the point I'm trying to make is I went from taking notes and scribbling notes and you file the story when you file the story to I was with a BlackBerry at the time, a BlackBerry, a Sony Handycam, and I was filing this story in real time. So as it happened, I would take pictures, I would take video, I would somehow get it off to the newsroom. I'd write copy on the BlackBerry, get it off to them. So they had it up on so the news truck exploded, and this was something because I had the camera on it actually because it was on fire, and the whole screen went orange. And then you saw your brave reporter. You saw the ground going like that as the brave reporter ran away. But
yeah, well, I can't blame you. I mean, damn it, man. That's yeah. That's startling.
Yeah. So the thing is it was up on the website 20 minutes later. So that's really how news has changed. Is that it has gone from the next morning to that minute, and that's the problem. Of course, the newspapers have found is that people and so much of the news out there is free these days. People get free news right in the minute, right real time, and when the paper comes up the next day, it's just telling them what they already know. Only with hopefully with a little bit more expanse of story and knowledge and what have you. But that's how it's changed from the next day or the next week to that minute.
And I want to talk about that. This idea that everything is, and feel free to jump into the financial side of things because the business model around journalism is really changing by necessity, and it's based off of this simple premise that it's a lot more expensive to report real news than it is to just create shit out of whole cloth and throw it up on the internet and pretend like it's real. I mean, Right. I mean, it's if you're talking about market capitalism, then we're talking about not only is it cheaper to create bullshit and make it look real, it's more lucrative because you can create clickbait stuff, right? I mean, that's kind of the end of it. And what's happening online, you have a lot of shameless people that are just putting shit up and making money off of it. Where you have compare that to reporters that, I'm not going to tell you your job, but I mean, your job is to, tell it as you see it, do the research, verify facts. What's your comment on that whole sort of idea?
Well, I know that he went quote unquote bankrupt, but how rich is Alex Jones? This guy who refused to believe in Sandy Hook, and floats conspiracy theories out there by the hour. The guy's as rich as hell, and he doesn't have to spend money researching. He doesn't have to spend money on reporters on his staff. He floats something out there. People read it. He makes his money, and so and that's just an extreme example. But sure, Fox News to a certain extent, Tucker Carlson, these people, they don't need to gather facts. They need to gather clickbait, and that's what they do. That's their livelihood.
And that's the business model, right? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, it's just so much more expensive to do the actual research and on the ground reporting than it is to come up with stuff that. So my own just a little background there. I mean, I got sucked into a conspiracy theory back at the beginning of YouTube, and Alex Jones was one of the purveyors of one of the videos that I watched, and a few of the videos I watched. So it was around the 9/11 conspiracy, 9/11 truther. So I went through that whole thing, and I came out the other side after being convinced that I needed to type in 9/11 truther debunked, and I did some reading, and at that time, there was flashy videos being produced around that were very convincing. And the debunked websites were just a bunch of text that I had to read through. But it was tough, man. It was a tough road to hoe, and it was tough to come back from it. And that's part of what I really want to dig into with these conversations is the journalist's perspective on the way the market has changed, the financial model.
Yeah, and obviously it's changed a lot. Look at we use just a daily newspaper, for example. It doesn't have to be named. It's just a daily because they're mostly alike now online. Is you'll have the head, then you'll have a picture maybe, then you'll have 3 or 4 lines of text, then an ad, then 3 or 4 lines of text and an ad, and so it goes down like that. It used to be where you'd maybe have a banner above the headline and then read the story, and there'd be something, an ad, maybe along the side, one ad at the bottom, that sort of thing. They're interspersed through stories now. So I do think that's, I guess that pleases advertisers because they know they're being seen, but it's also a disservice to the reader who just wants to read a fluid story and get from start to finish.
Yeah. Do you have any stories that pop out about run-ins with conspiracy theorists? I mean, I'm sure you must have some by now.
Yeah, yes and no. I tend to dismiss them fairly quickly. After a while in this business, you get a pretty good sniffer, and you know what passes the smell test and what doesn't. So, I'd love to help you on this one, but I don't really have any good stories in which anything went long term or in which I was just people arguing. Really, is it? Especially since we went online and there were comments on stories. These people tend to not, at least in my experience, not talk to me as much as comment to me. So there's been a lot of that. But I had an editor in the Ottawa Sun. She was a terrific editor, and she once told me just 2 words: don't engage. Because I wanted to engage. I love engaging, but she said just if you engage, you're just pouring gas into the car. It's just going to keep going further and further.
Yeah, because it's really hard to change their mind. I mean, the fact is that a lot of these people now think that people like you are paid off.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah,
right?
a lot of them do, and mainstream media, right? Not exactly sure the day when that became a
Yeah.
swear word, but mainstream media for a lot of people is, and friends I have who I value on Facebook, distrust and dislike mainstream media. So yeah, that's a lot of that is born from online, and a lot of that is what we call keyboard warriors. You know, people who are very brave, like you and I right now, sitting behind a keyboard, but who who rarely show up in public to say anything.
One of the things that's really scary is that I seem to bump into them fairly regularly now, and they're a lot more. They're a lot more. I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but certainly a lot more confident of their position, right?
Mhm.
And I bump into them in all walks of life, and maybe I get into conversations with them because well, sometimes they overhear another conversation and they approach me and they say, oh geez, because I talk about these issues quite a bit. I'm on Twitter, sort of doing the keyboard warrior thing,
Yeah.
like you say, right? And I've kind of made it a bit of a mission of mine to go online and try and fight back against some of this stuff, because I've realized that pretending it doesn't exist is the worst possible thing you can do these days. That someone's got to be out there providing an alternate perspective, and what's startling and scary to me is that there are so many people that, whether they talk about it overtly or not, believe some of the stuff that's being proliferated around mainstream media. So, why don't you just tell me in your words why? And I know this, but I need you to tell me and tell the audience in your own words why it is so impossible for a free press with tens of thousands of reporters doing on-the-ground reporting to all be in lockstep, supporting one, conspiracy theory or another.
That's a very good question. It starts with influence. Again, I don't want to single anybody out, but we'll say Fox News or Tucker Carlson or Hannity, these guys who have influence. And the people who try to debunk these conspiracies. I know a professor at Western University who teaches a class in conspiracy theories, and she cannot put her picture on Twitter. She cannot. The blowback she gets is incredible, and so she has to be pretty much as anonymous as possible on social media in order to just live a normal life and not get attacked all the time. It's sheer numbers and influence, and when it comes to the media, once you build an audience, I mean, look at how profitable some of these stations are. Once you build an audience and you start making money, there's no stopping you.
Yeah, and that's certainly the point, right? I mean, what I've found is that the trolls, as we call them, right, are potentially just people that are absolutely shameless, and our brains have a hard time, with shameless liars. You know what I mean? I mean, we tend to believe people, right? Especially when they look us in the eye and they seem earnest, and they sometimes they'll even have a tear in the corner of their eye or something, right? I mean, we just have a hard time rooting out the liars, and liars have always been there. Nowadays, it's just amplified through social media, and it's a scary time from that perspective.
Well, here's the thing. Back in the day, snake oil has always been around, right? Snake oil has always been around. Snake oil salesmen have always been around. But back in the day, they had to travel from town to town, unpack their wares, take their snake oil out, give their spiel, sell a few bottles, and move on. Now, in the day of the internet and social media, the snake oil salesmen don't have to go anywhere. And they have access to millions of people, all at the same time. And if they're any good, whether they're selling pillows or conspiracy theories, or both, they reach a massive audience all at the same time. And then that massive audience conversely reaches each other. They reach
Hmm.
each other all at the same time. And it's kind of like picking a rock up and all the cockroaches come out from underneath it. And you didn't even know there was one there and suddenly there's 100. And they're all together and they're all in the same place and they can all be reached at the same time. So the days of traveling from town to town and hitting up 10 or 20 people at a time is over. Now it's hit a key, reach a million.
There was an interview a colleague of mine did recently with one of the fellas that went to Ottawa last year as part of the trucker convoy, and an anti-vax guy. And one of the things in that interview that really stood out to me, and I would like to get your reaction to what he said, was that there was quite a bit that stood out. But I mean, the one sentence that I want to throw at you was that he said, I grew up and then I suddenly realized that they had been lying to me my whole life. And so that's sort of the basis of what I want to get your comment on. He went on to talk about how he built this community with all the convoy people that he met at Ottawa, and that's made him sort of feel better about it, that he's got people to talk to and stuff. But he was, I guess the root of the comment is fear, right? I mean, he's terrified. This man was terrified, and I remember that when I was in the depths of this conspiracy theory. Was that wow, the whole, it's like the ground is shifted under your feet. It's like suddenly now everything I believed could it be true that this is all a lie, and that all of these tens of thousands and millions of people are lying to me? I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, what's your gut tell you?
It's difficult for me to look inside the head of somebody like that because I'm certainly not like that. But I think that people want to be accepted, first and foremost. They want to be accepted. They want to, in the United States, for example, let's say, where people don't want it to become so racially mixed, or they don't, they want to close the borders and what have you, and it all sounds like it's racial and racist and everything. And in some cases, no doubt that it is. But these people want things to be the way they've always been. They want their neighbors to look like themselves, to think like themselves. And I think people in general, they don't want change. And people in general who join these groups or organizations, I think what they want is they want people who look like them, who think like them, who talk like them. And they become part of this big hive mentality where they all think the same way, they all speak the same way, they all sort of pretty much dress the same way, and I think it's very easy that once you are accepted by these people, embraced by them even, how easy it is to believe what they have to say.
Yeah, that's a really important point, right? I mean, they become, through social media and through online, they become communities, right? My go-to example is flat earthers, right? I mean, if you've been a flat earther for 5 years, your whole friend circle are flat earthers. You may have started a t-shirt business selling t-shirts to flat earthers. How do you walk back from that? If someone comes to you with, they fact you over the head, that never works. Getting facted. Yeah. But how do you walk back from that? I mean, how do you walk away from a friend community, your support network? It's just, once you get so invested, that's where I was. Once you get so invested, it's really hard to walk back.
Sure it is. And I'm like anybody else. I have friends who think like me and like the same sports and like the same teams and like going for a beer maybe or something like that. These are the people I like. I tend not to be friends with people who are not like me. Although I do have some that are definitely not like me, but I appreciate their viewpoints and their thoughts, and I find them intelligent and interesting and so on. But it's very, very, very difficult to walk away from something that makes you feel good and accepted.
Tell me, and this is when when I hear people on the news, I'm a bit of a news junkie. I'm sure you are too. But when conspiracy theories are talked about on the news, one of the things that I always wish they would address is some of the most simple aspect of it, right? Which is, why is it absurd that so many free-minded people would all act in lockstep to say, help the WEF take over the world? I mean, why is that absurd? I know it's absurd. You know it's absurd. But there's a lot of people out there that think that it's actually possible. Do you have any answer for that?
Not a really good one, Brian. I'm afraid to say. I just, as I said, I have a hard time getting inside their head. Other than once you truly.
Well, you're out there, right? I mean, you're out there talking to people, doing your job. You know a lot of other journalists out there, right? What tends to be in the mind of these folks is that they think that they have a moral high ground, and that I was talking to it turned out PSW that helps my dad is a big conspiracy theorist, and I said to her, when you do your job, could somebody pay you to let one of your patients die or get sick? And she was like, of course not. Right? So, and then I said, so why do you believe that all these journalists who got into the business for their own reasons of self-integrity, why do you think they're all so easy to just buy off? And she didn't have an answer, but what usually happens is they just redirect and jump to something else. But do you have a comment on that idea?
I think that you can mistrust an entire subgroup of people. For example, reporters or people of a certain race, or men or women or gays or what have you. I don't think that journalists, who are the ones presenting the news, in some cases they think making up the news, would be any different. We are a subgroup, and there are people who are going to dislike us and going to mistrust us, regardless of what we say or do. So
it's an oversimplification. What's your job as a journalist? How do you describe your job?
Well, I'm underpaid and overworked, but otherwise,
yeah, I hear you.
But otherwise, my job is to inform people, to do my very best to gather all the facts, talk to the relevant people, and present news as unbiasedly as possible. And as human beings, we are naturally biased. We can never say that one person is totally unbiased, because I've written a lot of stories that I felt one way or another about. But my job is to disregard how I feel personally about something and just present the facts. So if you tell me this and somebody else tells me that, I'm going to try to give you equal space. I'm going to try to, I'm not going to editorialize, or at least I'm going to try not to editorialize. And so people, a lot of people see, read, or hear journalists presenting a story and think that that's how we feel about it. When in a lot of cases, or most cases, we are simply reporting what somebody else feels about something.
Yeah, and I haven't gone to school for journalism, but I feel pretty confident that that's kind of what they teach you, how to, to take yourself out of the story. I've heard that many times. Yep,
that's right. And we try to take ourselves out of the story, and it doesn't always work. I've written a couple of stories that I'm not proud of, that I allowed my feelings on the subject to maybe amplify one side or the other, but it's happened very few times, and it is something that any journalist worth their salt works very hard at every day.
Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah,
We're
so yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We're human beings, right? It reminds me behind Steve Bannon on his podcast set, what have you. He's got this sign that says there are no coincidences, and it's like, fuck off, man. I mean, come on, that's out of a movie, right? I mean, of course there's coincidences. I know, right? I mean, it's like it's not conspiracy. It's either coincidence, or sometimes there's conspiracies. Okay, yes, but they generally stick out like a sore thumb. But it's either coincidence or incompetence these days.
You know what?
So much incompetence, right?
The fact that a woman from Spain met a man from Canada, they had a few drinks and got it on, and here I am. That's coincidence, buddy. It's not divine intervention.
Yeah, no, that's the WEF for sure, man. That's the WEF for sure. They put you in position. You're a mole.
Everything is life is so disordered in so many ways. There's so many. A lot of things are directed, and they are. There's a lot of things are directed and created, but life is I keep wanting to say is a cabaret. I'm not going to do that, but life is a coincidence, and it's a lot of
right.
X's and O's and squares and circles, and when it comes to journalists, it's journalism. It's like that too. We something comes up, we certainly, for the pay most of us get, we certainly don't. We're not the stone cutters. We don't hide Martians or fix Oscar night. We just do our job.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me about this. This is fascinating to me, and I think this kind of thing is so relevant these days. And unfortunately, I think that this conspiracies and trying to disseminate truth from bullshit is going to be super duper important more and more as time goes on. So I can't thank you enough, Scott.
Well, thanks, Brian. It's been great being with you.
This is the Newsload.